Bonjour and welcome to a new unboxing video, and today I've got something special. It's always special anyway what I show you, but for me it is special because it's from a company I never buy from. I've had some huge issues in the past with that company. I mean, quality control issues, brittle plastic, lots of really figures that don't stand up on their own, that kind of thing. So I've always said I would not buy from them again. However, they've just released a line of product, and I thought, well, you know, it's actually a line of product that I like because it's based on something I really loved in the 80s and something that was probably the best toy line of the early 80s. And basically I said, well, you know, I'm going to give it a try against my better judgment, and that company is McFarlane Toys. I've had so many issues with McFarlane Toys, the Star Trek items they did, the All Monsters they did, and the Spawn figures they did in the originally. I mean, they were literally falling apart. But against my better judgment, I decided to buy their superpower figures. I mean, McFarlane has got the DC license and they're doing a decent job. I mean, to be fair, McFarlane's always had very good sculptors, and very good design when you look at the prototype, and it's actually the execution of the toys that's not always that good. We do have the same problem with NECA. NECA has a tendency to have quality control issues with their toys. So, but I loved the superpower line in the 80s. I mean, Superpowers was DC's version of Secret War, at least for the toys. So Mattel was doing Secret Wars with Marvel, and Kenner was doing Superpowers with DC Comics. So, and they released, I mean, is one of the most beautiful lines of the 80s. It was fantastic. It had really lots of nice features. Characters were great. They even created new characters for it. And when McFarlane announced that it was going to do a Superpowers line, which was their retro version, said, well, you know, let's see what it looks like. So I actually bought the full first wave of figures. I didn't buy the vehicle. There's also two vehicles. I just bought the 3 figures from the first wave, which are Batman, Superman, and Darkseid. So basically, the idea is it's the same packaging that they had in the 80s. I mean, that was definitely the packaging of the 80s. You can see the 2 vehicles here, the Batwing and the Supermobile, which, if I'm happy with the toys, maybe I will get to those, but I'm not quite sure, to be honest. And so basically you do have the exact packaging that Kenner was doing, except of course it says McFarlane Toys, and it's basically newer version of the figures. I mean, they are not reusing the molds from the 1980s, unlike so many of those retro lines that they do now. So it's a new version of Batman, new version of Superman, and a new version of Darkseid, but done in the style of the figures in the 80s. So basically you do have new for 2022, which is where they used to have the call out for the special features, because all of the figures in the 80s had special features. Flash was running very quickly, you were pressing his arm and his legs were moving. Same thing with Aquaman. Batman was punching, Superman was punching, Brainiac was kicking. I mean, they all had a special action feature. So I have no clue. I don't think those have a special feature, because at least they don't say anything about a special feature, but we're going to find out what they're like. So, well, of course, I mean, you know me, I'm not, I should put a disclaimer, please do not watch if you are a mint in package collector, but I never do that. So we do have Oh, that's stupid. That's not starting very well. Basically, the cape is held by a plastic bit, which means that there will be a hole in the cape. That's not very, and that's not a good start. It's really a shame because, I mean, there was an easy way to solve that, and it was to leave the cape on the back of the figure, whereas here they're doing something that is a bit strange, which is that the cape is basically stuck in the plastic at the back of the blister, and of course now we do have this beautiful hole in the cape. I mean, how good is that, or not good is it? I'm actually quite annoyed with that first bit, and I've just opened I've not even checked the figure yet, so I don't think it was needed to have this bit, and I'm pretty sure now that the same is going to happen to Superman. So you see what I mean when I say I'm not always I'm a bit wary of McFarlane toys, because this should have been avoided. One thing that I noticed, that this cape is very rigid, whereas the capes that they used in the 80s were more flowing, a bit like some of the fabric cape that they use in the Star Wars line. So you do have the cape like that, which has a little hoop, and the hoop actually fits around the neck. So let's see first the figure. So here is Batman. Looks very good. The design is very much the design of the superpowers in the 80s. So they were having those very broad shoulders, and they were having those bent arms as well. So that's a very good representation of the superpowers figure. I don't have a superpower figure to show you just to compare the size, but they seem to be about the same size. From what I heard, they are close to the original size. How many points of articulation? 1 no waist, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points of articulation, because you can actually bend their knee, which is nice to put them in a vehicle. No waist, but there was no waist articulation, if I remember well, except for Red Tornado and was it Silver Samurai? Samurai, who were having actually those cyclonic storm power, so they actually had an articulated waist, but I'm not sure the other one had. And it's a more modern version of the Batman suit. It's definitely not the 1980s, because we don't have the yellow oval under the Batman logo, and but it's very close. So let's see now how they that cape thing is really annoying me. I mean, how stupid is that? That is ridiculous. So let's put the cape. So as I was saying, the hoop should fit around the neck. So here we go. Here he is with his cape. I mean, it's not bad, because the cape is more rigid, and it has been bent as well in the packaging. It doesn't sit as nicely as it should, but it's actually not too bad. It's very shiny, but then again, if you put it the other way around, it's less shiny. So let's see if we can put it in reverse to see, just to see if it works, but I doubt it's going to work the other way around. But even though it would probably look better, yeah, you see, it looks better this way for the costume to have the shiny bit inside, but of course it doesn't really work around the neckline, because you've got the stitches, so we actually have to do it that way around. I mean, it's minor. I would have preferred something. I'm more annoyed because, of course, with the light coming from the front, I mean, I can only see the hole in the cape between his legs, which is I think is quite very, very distracting, very annoying. But all in all, apart from that, it's not a bad figure. Is it as good as the superpowers from the 80s? No, but it's not that bad. I just wish the cape was less rigid, and so that we could actually have it looking a bit better. So here you go, that's Batman. So the first, and it seems to be standing. Now we've got Superman. So Superman, you know the drill. You've got exactly the same thing. We've got the same back, except you've got, of course, the little card telling you all about Superman. And of course, we're going, I'm expecting the same problem with the cape. Yes, I can see that. Once again, I don't know who made that decision, because it's such a ridiculous thing to do, to put the cape like that. Because of course there's going to be a hole, and because it's not the best fabric, the hole will still be plainly visible. So I don't know why they just didn't put the cape in the back without tying it, even more so because it actually goes through this hole here, so it would hold without them having to do that. I'm expecting a problem on that one. So we do have so we do have the same problems. It is the same fabric, of course. We do have the same hole in the middle of the cape, and we do have a Superman logo, but to be fair, it looks like it may be a bit high. And if I remember well, the cape on the original Superman was slightly wider, much nicer as well, and of course less rigid, because once again we do have the rigidity of it also. You can actually see all kind of folds and stuff on the fabric. So the figure is the same as it's very, very similar to the one that they were doing in the 80s, except of course it doesn't have the same sculpt, but it's actually not a bad one. It's a good figure. Same thing, it's very much in the style of Superpowers from the 80s, and we do have the same amount of articulation, which is 7 point of articulation, so that we can sit him in the Supermobile, I suppose. Let's try and put the cape. So the cape, same thing, it does have this little hoop that you go put around the neck, and that will hold it there. So let's try and do that. So here we go. In the back, I think I do think that Superman logo is a bit high, and of course it wouldn't sit that high if it was less return. It should be slightly lower or slightly smaller, one or the other, because I mean it is a huge S. If you can see, it's actually almost bigger than the body of Superman. So having said that, same thing. It's not a bad figure. It's good. It's nice. The cape has the same problem as the Batman cape. I mean, we do have this. At least the Batman one is slightly bigger, or feels bigger. But both have a hole in the middle of the cape, and here you go. But still, I mean, it's a good effort. I don't know if I expected worse, but I sadly was expecting some issues like that. I mean, I didn't expect them to put a hole in the middle of the capes, but what do you know? And then we've got the third one, which is Darkseid. So Darkseid has his new 52 costume. I mean, I don't know if you remember the one that were released or for the Super Power collection in the 80s, or if you've ever seen it, but it was much bigger than this. So it is a bit disappointing. I mean, they made him bigger, but It's not as massive as the Kirby version, which had this beautiful feature, which was like a light well. So if you were putting him under a light, his eyes were actually glowing with the Omega effect, which I thought was very, very cool. And also he had a big fabric cape that you could remove with a big D medallion around his neck, whereas this one is much simpler. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a good figure, and it's not the dark side of the 80s. So that's the other issue, that you would think that they would do, if you're doing a retro collection, you try and do retro outfits, whereas they based this one on the new 52 look, which is the more modern look, which is nice but not as nice as the classic look, I'm afraid. So the head turns ever so slightly, but it's not a full articulation. We do have, of course, the shoulders articulation. We do have the leg and knees, so same thing. We do have a 7-point of articulation, and it's quite big. I mean, if you are doing it, he is bigger than Superman and Batman. He definitely is, but the original superpower was a bit bigger than that. So here we go. That's the first wave of 3 figures, which is not too bad. So you've got Batman, Superman, and Darkseid. It's really a shame about that cape. It's going to annoy me very seriously. It's one of the things, once you see it, you can't unsee it, sadly. But I mean, for McFarlane, that's not too bad. The figures are standing. So you do have the 2 vehicles also that go with it. So the Supermobile with the little fist at the front, which is based on the Supermobile from Corgi Toys in the 70s. And you do have the Batwing, which was interesting because they had never released the Batwing in the Superpowers collection in the 80s. Then we had the Batmobile, but not the Batwing. And there is a second wave coming, which I think has the Batman Who Laughs, and I can't remember what else. I mean, surprise. But yeah, there's a second wave coming up very, very soon. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to continue those, to be honest. I was quite happy because I love the Superpowers collection, and those, even though they're good, I find are slightly lacking, but still they're very good, and they are quite cheap as well, which is another good point. I mean, I don't know how they got their prices, but I think they're about $14.99 in the UK, and probably about the same in the US. So not too bad a price. So not bad. Could do better, but it's still better than most of the McFarlane toys I've had in the past. And I will speak to you again soon. Bye.